Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow podcast. And on today's episode, Arsenal look to have wrapped up a deal for Martin Zubimendi, but why should Gunners fans be concerned about their squad building? Then Real Madrid suffer another beatdown at the hands of Barcelona. Can we learn anything from this latest drubbing? While Bayern Munich swoop for a Chelsea star, but who is it and how much they cost? That's all on today's episode of the Transfer Flow. So we're back for another episode of the Transfer Flow. I've got to say, Ravi, we're actually back for your last episode of the Transfer Flow podcast for now. You're leaving us.
Yeah. I'm going to go back into working in football. So I figured I can't be doing this podcast while I'm actually working inside a club. So we'll leave it there. But it's been a pleasure working, talking to you and doing these parts with you. I think I've learned a lot, about a lot of things along the way, and also working with Rishi and, being amazing producer. Ted, thanks to everyone. But let's get into it.
Yeah, well, we're going to miss having you here. But, I guess the downside of having a smart person on the podcast is that sometimes other people think we could use this guy as well. You're right. Let's get into it. So we've got a pretty big news story today, which is that Arsenal look to be wrapping up a deal for Martin Zubimendi from Real Sociedad. Obviously, they wanted him in the summer, and so did Liverpool. We don't know how far down the road that got. But now it seems that he is going to join at the end of the season for his release clause, maybe a little bit more, so that Arsenal can pay it in installments instead of upfront. This is a player they've wanted for a long time. They finally got him. Basque midfielders galore. What are your initial impressions of this, Ravi?
My initial impression was, is this the player they need most right now? And can Declan Rice not do the job? I know Declan Rice has been playing a little bit ahead this season, or at least if you look at his numbers, he's playing more as a 8 than as a pure 6. But that's something that he could do. I think it's not like he can't play as a 6. So I'll actually lean into you. Like, what do you? We've analyzed this player before. I think he's a very positional, holding, deeper lying player compared to, and so he doesn't have the propensity to go forward as much as the other midfielders that Arsenal's got. But other than that, like, yes, surely it's a different flavor, but it's not like a completely different product. Like, he's still very similar to a Declan Rice. So what do you think? Like, I know you are very much in the know with Arsenal, or much closer to the happenings there.
Sure. I like the player. We've talked about him before, and we like the player. And interestingly, in the absence of Marino, he's played kind of as a solo holder quite a bit. It's been more of a 4-1-4-1, or I guess you could say a 4-3-3. It depends how you want to look at it. But, we've seen an uptick in his defensive numbers, an uptick in his passing into the final third, in the absence of Marino. And actually, more challenges further forward, more touches in the box. So it feels like he's doing a bit more of everything. The concerns, I guess, it feels like Arsenal are going to have quite a lot of defensive-minded midfielders. I mean, Marino can obviously get forward, but he's not like a tricky midfielder who plays on the edge of the box. He's a big guy. Zubimendi, Rice, plus Odegaard, it still feels like a very defensive set of players. And if Odegaard gets injured, you're still in trouble. But I mean, I guess let's start at the beginning. My first issue with it is kind of financial. I don't think it's particularly good business, because Arsenal were going to pay this buyout fee last summer, and now they're going to pay it this summer. And last summer he was 25, and this summer he's 26. And if they give him a 5-year contract, then they're essentially paying the same amount for. They're kind of trading a year of peak production for a year of post-peak production, right? But paying the same money, and that to me seems like not terribly good value, I guess.
Just to interject you there, also in between, they also paid for Marino.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
But I mean, numerically, you can see it, right? Jorginho and Partey are both leaving at the end of the season. Their contracts are up. That frees up a lot of wages. And Zubimendi, I think, is a more reliable and better all-round midfielder than Partey. He's maybe not as good a passer as Jorginho, but he's got legs, so he's better than him in that sense. So that's good. It maybe leaves Arsenal a guy short in midfield. So you'd hope that they have a plan there, whether it's an academy kid or a cheap prospect, or maybe Arteta thinks Timber or White or Miles Lewis-Skelly, somebody's going to get some minutes here in midfield. My other concerns, I guess, it feels kind of like target lock a bit. You know, you'll obviously know about this, but it feels as an outsider like often managers just get keyed into a player and they're like, that's the player I want. And I kind of want him no matter what. And a year passes, 18 months passes, and they still want him. And here I think Edu went. Is Arteta just kind of driving the bus? And he says, well, that's the guy I want. And the club's like, well, we've got to keep him happy. And then you wonder, he's not going to be bad for Arsenal, but is it possible they could have got somebody else, somebody cheaper, maybe even somebody who only does 80% of what Zubimendi does? But if they get Zubimendi and then in the summer they have to save a little bit more when they're going for the attacker they want or whatever, in 3 years' time, we might say, well, that's a bit of a misallocation of resources, right?
That's a great point, because that's something that I was thinking about. Is if you're going to spend, I think, whatever, upwards of 60 on Zubimendi as a transfer, and then 5-year contract, whatever that cost is that eating into your budget to sign the number 9 or the attacker budget? And I'm sure that because it's going to be after this signing, because it's already been done, they will justify whatever price they pay for the striker. Well, but the question is that are they going to miss out on someone that they could have gotten if they had all this money? And I think, to your point, I think that's the opportunity cost of doing this. And had they, and the reason I brought up Merino signing is, if they had done this last year, do you still think they would have gone and gotten Merino for 35 or 30, whatever? I doubt.
I can't imagine they would have, no.
Yeah, so now we're like, all this is adding up. These are all opportunity costs that you don't normally see, because you're going sequential. You're going, we've done this, now we've done this, now we've done this. So I think that's what I see. Like, I'm not sure why this is that important right now. But sure, I mean, he's a good player. Like, at the end of the day, I think they're signing a very good player that we think is going to contribute. Now, the other question is, Rice, Odegaard, Zubimendi, Merino, who is the one who sits? I guess probably Merino.
Probably Merino, but I mean, Arsenal's record with Rice playing as that, more attacking left-sided central midfielder is very, very good. And I can imagine it being horrible to face in the Champions League, especially. But it does still feel like it's missing a little bit of, I don't know, narrow space play in there. That's where you think, well, actually, Zubimendi's probably better at that than Rice. So do these guys kind of yo-yo? One goes forward, one stays back. I don't really know. This is kind of the thing I struggle with, because when I look at those midfielders, one has to sit, probably Marino, but they still haven't. They're still not alleviating the creative burden on Odegaard. And I look at that midfield and I think that's pretty defensive. And that means the left winger that you go for, if you're going for a left winger, needs to be a creative type player. And we're pretty certain that Arteta wants Nico Williams. That seems to be the guy he wants. But that means kind of doubling down on this setup that they've had up till now, which is we do all our creation from the flanks. All our creativity comes from the flanks. We actually don't really pass into the box from the central area. Like Arsenal are way behind the other top teams in that. And as we've talked about a bunch of times, it makes them easier to defend, because teams are like, well, there's nobody at the top of the box. Who cares? Like, there's nobody at the top of the box who's gonna score reliably from 20 yards. There's not a De Bruyne who can play the pass or shoot. And maybe Arteta changes that. Maybe he says, right, well, our goal is going to be that the right back is the guy who combines with Saka, and Odegaard is, in the D rather than over on the right-hand side. Or maybe they end up with someone like, not Nico Williams, someone like, like Xavi Simons or someone who's more midfieldery than wingery. Like, maybe that helps. But my concern is that you're building even further into this plan that you've had already, which is to do all the creation in these high areas on the flanks. And I think quite a lot of teams in the Premier League are quite comfortable defending against that setup now. Especially if there is no threat on the edge of the box, it's easy for them to divert resources to the flanks and double up on the wingers. And then you think, well, is this gonna get better or is it gonna get worse? You know, that even if you get Nico Williams, is going to be as good as Saka? Probably not. And even for Saka, it's very, very hard to be creating against double teams every week. So my worry is that Arsenal are going to have this incredibly, really good defense and an incredibly efficient system of moving the ball up into these high areas on the flanks. And then maybe they just get penned in there by teams defensively and they can't really play through. I mean, I would hope that all this stuff has been discussed and maybe Arteta thinks, right, okay, well, actually, we are going to try and get Odegaard more central next season. But I look at this and it feels like kind of doubling down on what they've been doing so far. And while the attack is fine, it's certainly not. It's not elite by any measure. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point because now I think you're going to live in the same world of scoring one goal and then trying to, or maybe it's 2 goals and then trying to win the game by 1 goal. That world, because as you rightly pointed out, wide spaces are easier to defend because one of the kind of fundamental principles how teams defend is what they call inside out. You just kind of push everybody out. Like you try to kind of protect the inside spaces and the central spaces because it's easy, like because the sideline is defending from one side for you on the flanks. So I think that it does seem like they're doubling down on the same strategy or same philosophy of attacking through the flanks. I guess we'll have to see with Nico Williams if Nico Williams is the player, and if him and another Basque player, Nico Williams and Saka both then take on guys from both sides. Maybe that opens up the middle a little bit more. And that will give some of these guys to occupy more central spaces and create something from there. But again, it all doesn't seem very proactive. It seems a bit more reactive, that if these things work the way we want on the flanks, then maybe we'll get something through the middle type, rather than address the main problem, right, going through the middle. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's something there where Arteta thinks, well, I don't really like Rice's passing from deep midfield, in which case he probably shouldn't have spent 100 million on him.
Which is the other point. Like, well, if that is, if you don't like or Rice that much, then again, you can't go back and kind of question every decision. But it just does seem like there is not a lot of, I don't know if there is enough kind of reflection and look at like what are we really doing, and or there is like this vision of very direct, I'm only going to look forward, and then whatever happened in the past, I'm just going to go react to what I need to do going forward, but not learning much from the past.
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of things they could do with this, and like it's not like we object to the signing. Like, he is a very good player. He does fit Arsenal. If Arteta wants to get aggressive, then he could play Zubimendi as a lone holder against some of the weaker teams in the league. I think that would be with Arsenal's defenders, like that probably is fine. And obviously he has played with Marino before. Like it's certainly not bad. Plus, there's the element of the finances. Like, I haven't dug into the finances that much, but Partey supposedly is on over £200,000 a week. So, something like over £10 million a year. Jorginho is going to be on 100 to 150. Like, these are big earners. So if that frees up £15 million a year, then maybe from Arsenal's point of view, they're like, we can do this transfer, and it's okay. It doesn't hurt our ability to go and get the winger we want and the attacker we want, and blah blah blah. Plus, maybe I'm wrong when you say something like you can get a guy who does 80% of this. Well, Arsenal aren't really in that zone, I guess. That they don't need the guy who does 80%. They need the guy who does the job. So that there are plenty of ways to look at it, I think, that are kind of a bit more charitable to this kind of squad building. But it does just feel like Arsenal have spent an absolutely colossal amount of money to retool the midfield, and they're still tweaking and changing, and I'm not sure that it fixes the fundamental problem, which is the attack is a bit one-dimensional, a bit predictable. Maybe that if you made me guess, I think that they want Nico Williams and then they want Benjamin Šeško. Like those are the guys we've reliably heard rumors about. Who knows? Then they're like, right, okay, we've got these two guys who can beat people on the dribble, who can create. We've got Odegaard as well, and we're just going to toss in balls at Šeško all day and have Marino or Rice crash. And it is going to be hard to defend, but the other possibility is they don't get their ideal target, or their ideal target comes and it just doesn't quite work because they're not a physical mismatch against Premier League defenders. And Arsenal are trying to kind of Atletico Madrid their way to a title, which is maybe good in the Champions League, but like I say, it's not a recipe for winning the league anymore.
Yeah, especially the way the leagues now, how the game is, within the Premier League, how the game has changed and where it seems to be going. It does seem like a very different approach to this and a more conservative approach to the whole thing. And the other kind of way to rationalize this is also that looking at the injuries they've had this year, having another player that's at that level in that position probably is not a bad thing at all.
Yeah.
Because someone could be out for extended period of time, and then suddenly you realize, okay, we don't really have that much depth here.
I think it's just what it comes down to what you were saying at the beginning, which is like, what's the opportunity cost? Like, we don't know that right now, but we might look back in 2-3 years' time and say, okay, that was fine because they were able to do all the other stuff that they needed to do. And we might look back in 2 or 3 years' time and say they'd have won a lot more if they'd dumped all that money on an absolutely incredible left winger or something and just kind of rolled with the midfield. But shall we move on? Accidentally, we've ended up today with kind of a Spanish football fiesta. So we started with Zubimendi. We're now going to go on to El Clasico. So there was a Clasico at the weekend. The Supercopa took place in Saudi. Barcelona won 5-2. It wasn't quite the same story as before because Mbappe, I think at least, was very, very good. And that first goal, incredible run. The kind of goal that you'd expect this Barcelona high line to give up a lot more.
Yeah.
What's your take on the game, though? Because, I mean, in the end, it was just... If it weren't for the red card that Szczesny got in the 56th minute, I think, this could have been any number.
Yeah, this could have been a big number, like an American, like a 7 or 8 type number. Yeah, it was hard to watch from a Real Madrid perspective after that first goal. Even the funny thing was, I think Sid Lowe wrote it like they scored the first goal, but that was against run of play in the 5th minute because Barcelona already had a few chances, like Lamine Yamal was flying. And it's it was, and you knew that lead was not going to stay too long. I think it was just a matter of time. Rafinha was really good, and there was multiple issues with the Real Madrid. I think we've discussed a lot about the balance of the front four, but I think in this game we could look at a couple of other things. One is their midfield. Like, so they played Camavinga and Valverde as the two, and then had nominally Bellingham as the 10. And obviously they all kind of shift to the left as usual. But anyway, that versus, and Barcelona played Gavi a little bit advanced behind, with Casado and Pedri behind them as a 3 in the midfield. Now that midfield, those 3 dominated that midfield. So like it just was. Real Madrid couldn't really control anything, and they were always outnumbered. It felt like it was always 3v2 in the midfield. And so like that was one issue that I think they didn't solve. I think in the second half, he put on Camavinga should have probably gotten his second yellow. He was like towards the end of the first half or early second half, he should have gotten a second yellow. But I think that Ceballos came on, I think, to replace him later on. But that was one, and the other thing is right side of Real Madrid defense. One being Tchouaméni as a center back, and the other Lucas Vazquez, who's a winger, like converted to right back, does a good job in when everybody else is clicking. But and obviously the Rafinha had like a field day on the left side, just going up against those two. And I think that in terms of center back play, like Tchouaméni has zero instincts as a center back. Like it's not his fault that they keep putting him there. Now there is like a stat that they were mentioning during the game that Real Madrid hasn't lost a game where Tchouaméni played as center back until this match. And I think that stats like that make they are so lacking context that well, who did they play against? And okay, they won the game, but Real Madrid is going to win 75 to 80% of the games they play, no matter who they have.
Yeah, exactly.
So they can kind of win those games. But so what it is, and he always looked like he always misses the marker. I mean, his mark, he always misses his mark. Or like you always see a few places like, yeah, that's not a center back. Like the way he moves, and it's not his fault. They're putting him out there. And obviously against Barcelona, against Lewandowski, like that was not a good matchup. So I think the thing is, like, I think this is where I think if you look at like Raul Ascensio, who's been pretty good coming from the academy and filling in the previous matches, I think he should have started as a right-sided center back, because I think he's done well enough and he's a center back. So instead they have Tchouaméni, and that really did not help them at all. So I think with those two kind of mismatches on the field, it was really difficult for them to really sustain attacks. Even after the red card, they didn't really create anything. Like they scored the ensuing free kick after the red card, but beyond that, they didn't create any threatening chance at all in the next 35 minutes or 40 minutes, including stoppage time. So it does feel like it's definitely, so now they've conceded 9 goals to Barcelona in 2 games. And one of them was in Bernabeu, other is in Jeddah in Saudi. It's not even like they're playing in Barcelona. So I think now they're looking at more kind of immediate and more drastic solutions, because I think Real Madrid has always been slow to make big changes. They've always were like, okay, we can make this work. We have this group. We trust this group. We're going to find a solution within the group. I think they've reached a point where I think they needed someone on the right back to play at right back who's a right back. And this is what we feared when Carvajal went down. Vazquez was he can plug in admirably a few games here and there, but he's not going to do the job for 3/4 of a season. And that's what's showing up right now. I think while they wait for Trent, I think that's another saga that they could sign him in the summer. But I think they're not going to wait for that. They might get like a stopgap solution before that, somebody that's a more defensive right back. The other solution that I thought was pretty interesting that they're thinking about or read is that with Alaba coming back from injury, playing like a back line of 3, at least in the bigger games, to shore up some of kind of the defensive side of things, and also maybe help with a little bit more, make it easier to build because of numbers literally just there. But the worry there is like, okay, who among the attackers is going to sit if they're going to play a third center back? And so can they sustain an attack if, let's say, Rodrigo is the odd man out? Can they really sustain attacks with just Jude, Vinicius, and Bellingham? Can they beat the top teams, or can they win Champions League knockout rounds? That's the question. So they are definitely now looking at more. I think they're reaching, and for Real Madrid, they're probably in a panic situation right now.
But they have to pick one of these, like, because as much as they both might not be very appealing, what they're doing now is just a half measure. It doesn't work at all. They're not an irresistible attacking side, and they cannot defend at all. I mean, like, yes, I absolutely agree that like Ascensio, I've got in my notes the third goal, which is the one where Koundé plays this long ball from pretty much the halfway line and right on the byline, on the touchline rather, just plays it over the top, and Rafinha runs between the two centre backs and scores a header. And I think John Muller said on Blue Sky, there are only two people in the world who don't know that run is happening, and they both play in Real Madrid's backline. You know, everybody knows that Rafinha is making that run, and the first goal as well. You know, that those are kind of the two most shocking goals for me. The first goal where Gavi drags the midfielder away and Lewandowski drops in, and he just plays it through for Yamal, and Yamal just does it from there. It's just,
yeah. The other one. I mean, all those goals were like. I mean, the fifth one was just like two one-touch passes, and Rafinha was in front of goal.
Yeah,
like that was like just Casado just finding that pass, and it was just like completely opened up. And yeah, I mean, yeah, they just don't. I don't think they have a defensive structure they work that they want to revert to when they lose the ball. It just does seem that it's almost becomes those 4 guys or 5 guys, they'll have to run back and defend. Rest of us we're gonna wait for the ball.
But this worked for them for so long. Like, I mean, there were lots of periods. I think Ancelotti's a smart tactician. I think Zidane's pretty smart. But there were lots of periods during, you know, the Zidane three-peat where they were kind of a bit vibesy. You know, they just didn't really... You were kind of like, what are Real Madrid's tactics here? And it was like, I don't know, we'll get the ball and we'll put up 20 shots and one of them will go in. It'll be fine. But they have to sit an attacker is what I come down to again and again. And I just don't care who it is, but they have to do it. And it's complicated by the fact that they spent a year turning like Bellingham gradually moved forwards. You know, when he was younger, he when he was kind of 16 years old, the numbers that popped for him is he was a good passer, but he dribbled a lot and he had a lot of defensive actions. And that was still true until a couple of years ago. And they turned him into this kind of 10 / you know, like box crashing midfielder. And now they're in this situation where they've got this extra guy who, as you were saying off air, you know, just kind of wants to hang out by the penalty area, when what they really need is someone as rangy as him in midfield who can do a bit of everything and try and control the game. Like, when they signed Bellingham, I looked at their roster of midfielders and I thought, Tchouaméni, Camavinga, Valverde, Bellingham, they could, if they wanted, maybe become the best defensive team in the world, because these midfielders are all like pretty athletic. They're good passers, but they're basic. Like, they're a couple. Valverde is a pest. He's not an amazing defender, but he's a real pest. And I think Camavinga is a great defender, and Tchouaméni can be a great defender. You know, I thought they're going to be so hard to get through, and instead they've just kind of turned into this weird hybrid thing where it's like so the thing that stood out to me is that I was looking at pass completion against them in La Liga this season, and the pass accuracy against Barcelona is the lowest in the league. It's under 72%, best in the league by far, and even like 3 or 4% improvement on last season, which was already, I think, best in the league or second best in the league. The pass accuracy against Real Madrid in La Liga is 81%. They're 14th for this. And the same is true in the Champions League. In the Champions League, only Bruges and Slovan Bratislava allow opponents a higher pass accuracy than Real Madrid do. And so they don't disrupt opposition possession at all. And in La Liga, the only team last season, and one of the few teams this season, who allow opponents to have more, you know, settled possession than they do, is Atleti. But Atleti can trust their defense and then break. If Real Madrid could trust their defense and break, then it would kind of be fine, because I think, look, if you've got 2 attackers on the pitch, but those 2 attackers are Vinny and Mbappe, then fine. Like, that probably works most of the time. But there's not a joined up plan here, and at a certain point you do have to look at Barcelona and you say, this is a coaching job that Flick has done. It's not like they signed a bunch of guys. Like, look, I guess they did in a sense, because all these academy guys were great. But Flick has coached them to do this. And whether it's that Carlo's at a stage in his career where he kind of can't really be bothered, or maybe even he is starting to lose his touch for the first time in like a 30-year career. I would never bet on that, but it's possible, I guess. Something is happening there where they're just like, we're not going to solve this with coaching. We can only solve it with acquisitions. It just feels a little bit.
I think just to track back a little bit your comment about like they've become this team with attackers and just this disjointedness. I think that just take this team and they added Mbappe in the summer. If you didn't do that and you add like a number 9 or just keep it as is, I think it would have worked a lot better, because then you had an extra midfielder and then Bellingham could attack. Bellingham could play that, when they played sort of like the 4-3-3/4-4-2 diamond, where Bellingham is behind the two, Rodrigo, Vinicius coming from wide into the central channel. That could work. Now, what they've done is they added Mbappe to this mix, and they thought that this is going to work just like that. And I think, to me, like that, everything can trace back to that point. Sure, Toni Kroos retiring doesn't help. But I think the balance problem is exacerbated by adding someone like, Mbappe, who occupies the same space as Vinicius. And so Mbappe had a great game. Vinicius gave the first assist, but pretty discreet game for him. He got subbed out around the 75th or something like that. And this is something that we worried about early on when the signing happened, is can these two have great games in the same game, Vinicius and Mbappe? I think the answer looks like it's not going to happen. And that makes sense, because they have to have the same opportunities or same type of play to be successful.
Yeah. And it just feels like one of them's always going to eat the other person's. Like, there's a way where it does work. That you can imagine a world where, I don't know, maybe they're both too left wingery. If they were both kind of left winger / strikers, then there is obviously a world where they interchange and are really dangerous as a result, because defenders can't really lock onto them. But because neither one of them is a proper centre forward, it just doesn't. And also, I guess, because the other flank doesn't work. Like, I was thinking about them this week because it made me laugh that PSG were going and getting Kvara, despite the fact that Barca plays left wing. But I thought, but at least at PSG, your right wing sometimes is Dembele and Hakimi, like that's dangerous. Whereas at Real Madrid, it's like Lucas Vazquez and Valverde, and you think, who's dragging them over there? Who's dragging the defenders away from the left flank?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point. Like that it just doesn't. There's just like they've added a lot of instability and ambiguity to the system that won the Champions League and the league last year by adding Mbappe and without addressing other issues.
Mm. And we haven't even got to guys like Endrick and Arda Güler, and you can't keep all these guys happy forever. I think there's always this kind of perspective among football fans where they're like, well, nobody wants to leave Real Madrid. It's like, but they do. They want to play.
Yeah. And the thing with, like, I think you brought up a point about, like, if they both can one of them play as a winger, other one play as the forward and interchange and all that. Do you think that a different style of coaching could get that out of them? Meaning of somebody that's more different, maybe more aggressive style coaching, saying, you're only going to do this, you're only going to do that. I don't know. You can do that with superstars like Vinny, and maybe it's a ship that has already sailed with Mbappe and Vinny, but something where a different type of coaching could make them work better with each other.
Yeah. I mean, you'd hope so. You'd hope that a different manager will be able to figure something out, whether it's somebody who's more forceful or somebody who kind of has the clout at this stage of their career to say, when they take the job, look, if I want to bench Mbappe for 15 games, you've got to let me do it. I don't know if it is that. Like, I assume that must be possible, but at a certain point, somebody has to say to Real Madrid, you can keep losing games to Barcelona by 4 goals. Like, we could do that. We could do that forever, or we can try and do something that works. Like, it's very hard to tell, and given that they want Xabi Alonso, we assume that Xabi Alonso is going there in the summer. that also feels like a strange one because he's not going to be naive about what's expected about Real Madrid, obviously, but but the style he's playing right now does not.
Yeah, it's
Doesn't.
not. I
Yeah.
don't know how many players that they have in the starting 11 that can switch to that style.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think so. This, to summarize, I think with Real Madrid, the only thing that'll drive change there is if they don't win the Champions League. To me, like if they end up not winning the Champions League this year, to me that would be the biggest driver for change. I think nothing else, even if they don't win the league, I don't think if they don't win the league and they just win the Champions League, I don't think that will be, that would be a success for them. But failure in Champions League is the only thing I think that would ring in the changes for them.
Well, I don't think they will win the Champions League. It's totally possible, like look, we are still not at the portion of the season where they normally start to get it together. But normally they start looking like they're going to get it together by
Yeah,
now, and they don't at all. They still look kind of messy, and they I love Ancelotti, but he does deserve some criticism for this. Like the squad is built in a ridiculous way, but I think, look, I don't want to just bring it back to Arsenal all the time, but I think about Arsenal playing Liverpool at the Emirates in November or something. And Arsenal ended that game with a back line of Thomas Partey playing right back, Ben White playing right-sided centre-back, Kivior, and then Urian Timber playing left-back. And they looked much, much more secure than Real Madrid do against much worse opposition than Liverpool, still playing with a bunch of guys who cost a load of money and are not like bad by any means and are shielded in theory by some of the rangiest midfielders in the game. So to me the press is going to need to get going at some stage. Like I just don't see how. I think they've been lucky to get as far as they have without ever really having a really good press. But who knows if they have the talent to do that? Because those players might
yeah,
not want to.
yeah. Both in terms of players and also in the staff. Like if they can actually get them to do something.
So, moving on from Spanish football for a minute, and yes, I am now in lower res because we had a small technical issue. And speaking of technical issues, Chelsea have too many players. And one of them is Christopher Nkunku, who has wanted to leave for some time and has been agitating for it. We've seen a million press stories now over the last 6 months. He was linked to Manchester United. Now he's linked to Bayern Munich. And I think Bayern Munich would be quite happy to take him off Chelsea's hands. Chelsea supposedly wants 60 million plus for him. That's more than they paid. And he's played under 900 minutes for them over 18 months in the league, at least. So I think they'd be lucky to get back what they still owe on him, which I think is between 35 and 40. Those are all the technicalities, though. Ravi, you're quite keen on the player, though, as a fit for Bayern Munich.
Yeah, I think looking at where he operates and how he plays his game, I think he will slot as I would say, just right behind Harry Kane, as a really good option there that can score as well as create. He can also spell Leroy Sané on the left. He can play from the left side as well. So I think he gives them that. Right now, they have Musiala, who's missed some games this year, young player, very good player, obviously. And then some of the, Thomas Müller is playing a little bit in that 10 role. I think that it would be an upgrade and also like a player in his prime playing that. So I think fit wise, I really like this signing, and he's well versed with Bundesliga. He has 4 really good seasons. When he was much younger, when he was 22, 20, 23, there are a couple of seasons where he had 15 assists, and a couple of seasons where he had more than 15 goals. And so it's like a really good. I think he's going to go back to some place that where he's been very successful before, and he'll go to the best team there. I think there is a lot of good things from my perspective in terms of the fit and how he can slot in right away for them.
Yeah, he can cover lots of positions for them. And also, I mean, look, we love Musiala. Everyone loves Musiala. But there has been a little drop in his passing this season. You know, his expected assists have kind of gone from about 0.3 per 90 down to 0.2. He's passing into the box quite a lot less. And as you say, has had some injuries in there. And Nkunku can help with all of that, even if it's just, you know, being overplayed that's hurting Musiala. He can help with all that. Cover Kane, cover left wing. That is good stuff. The one thing about it is, you know, the money is important because they can't pay like game changing money for him, because I don't think he really does radically change their chances of winning something. Like, I think they're going to win the league, and in the Champions League, obviously a good player is a good player, but their attack is still kind of irresistible in the Champions League even without him. Now, he definitely helps the press, right? You know, he's a really hard worker. But he doesn't turn them into Champions League favourites from being one of a pack of favourites. So from that point of view, I don't think you want to spend a load of money. You've also got Mathys Tel there, who is going to get some striker minutes and going to get some left wing minutes, I assume. Like, that's kind of what's happened in the past. Plus, they apparently want Florian Wirtz this summer. So I think this definitely improves them. I think it's a really good player. But if it stopped me going for Wirtz, I wouldn't do it. And you've got to assume that Bayern think it's not going to stop them going for Wirtz either, because that's like the jewel in the crown of German football right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, as you know, in isolation, just as a player, obviously the price becomes important. As you said, something more manageable in the 30 to 35 range is probably will get the deal done for, but not sure how, if Chelsea are trying to get out of PSR stuff or any kind of create some surplus there to help them with what might be coming down. Then they might not budge. But then the player, he's firmly been their Conference League player. He's in that Conference League group, right? Like, he doesn't play on much during in the regular season. So yeah, I think that there's enough parties here that are interested for the move. So this is probably one that will drag on, but I think it will get done by the end of closer to the deadline.
It would be crazy if Chelsea set such a high asking price that they ended up stuck with him for the rest of the season. Like, they just don't get anything out of him. And I mean, and maybe there's an opportunity here as well to reduce the financial burden on them right now, because they get rid of him. Okay, maybe they take a little loss overall, but if they sell him for 30, 35, it's not going to be much. It's going to be by 5 or 10 that they lose overall over the deal. Mudryk, possibly they might not have to pay wages there if there's that clause in his deal. You know, I don't really know what that situation is. So maybe this kind of helps their finances, but I just don't think they can be silly about it. And they're going to have to. It's better to sell now for a reasonable fee than get to the summer, get to the PSR deadline, and suddenly you're like, oh God, we got to sell all these guys 20 mil below asking. Good player. I think I would like to see him playing more, and German football really does suit him. He can do a bit of everything. It's a really, really fun player to see. Okay, one last little bit of Spanish football then before we say goodbye for this week, and in your case, goodbye forever. Loic Bade, French centre-back. He's currently at Sevilla. He's been linked with Aston Villa. This is Unai Emery and Monchi kind of, you know, looking back on the past, like getting out the scrapbook, like thinking about what they used to have. I don't know. It does just feel a little bit that way, right? Like they're just going, this is Monchi going for a guy he knows.
Yeah, for sure. And also to a team that's in all kinds of problems, financial as well as ownership problem. I don't know if you're aware of the father and son fighting for the control at the club. It's I think, you know, going back and they've gotten a little better. I think they've in the last few months, but they've had like a horrible start to the season. I mean, just looking at the player, I think he's more of like, I think we saw another deal today for Nikola Milinkovic, like a right-sided center back. Bade is also a right-sided center back, tall, 191, 24-year-old. that has played a lot of seasons already. Like he's played at Rennes, I think, and then he was on loan first at Sevilla, and then they bought him for 12 million. So he is definitely the more of the athletic version of the center backs, if we want to profile him. Less in terms of technical ability, but he shows up very well on dribbling. Like he just does carry the ball he does carry the ball forward. So very more on the aggressive side in terms of defensive activity. So that definitely means that now if you have someone to pair with that's more a passer and probably more of a cerebral, someone that can kind of guide this other guy that's just more of a athletic version, I think that would be like a great complementary fit. And I see who is on the other side for Aston Villa. One of them is Paul Torres on the left side. And when I look at their numbers together, there is definitely some level of complementariness to each of them. Like, I think that shows that I think this pairing is what you would want as a center back pairing in a back four. However, I also see some concerns where I think Pau's numbers have come down a little bit since he moved from La Liga to the Premier League. And I think he's still a very, very good center back, but he is not as impressive as his numbers at Villarreal. So now superimposing that concern on another player moving from La Liga to the Premier League, but in this case, his strengths are more where Premier League is also very strong in terms of like the athleticism and the speed of the game. So then, like, how much of regression will happen in terms of his output when he moves there? Like, how will he adapt? Now, having somebody like Pau, who is experienced both in Spain and England, can be a calming presence that can help him. But I do see that as a caveat to see like how he will translate, like his ability to carry the ball. Can he do that in the Premier League? And really, when he loses the ball, can he cover the space behind him? So that those are the type of questions I would have. Like I would want my scouts to do a good job there, like watch them thoroughly, because these sort of event data based metrics are for center back is the hardest position to quantify with just pure event data. So I think that I would need a lot more eyes and work on that. But definitely looks like the archetypical profile that teams want next to somebody that's a more of a passer that will control the tempo.
Yeah, and he's 24. He's a big guy.
Yeah.
He's 6'3".
Yeah,
like there's and I guess if you wanted to play devil's advocate, or if you wanted to make the kind of the bull case for him, then he rates so highly for stuff like ball recoveries and aerial wins, and his tackle success has been like trending upwards, that you think, well, even if he loses a little bit of that, he's still probably above average, for this stuff. Plus, he is 24. In fact, he's closer to his 25th birthday, I think, than his 24th. But he only has like 100 League 90s at that age. And a lot of those were when he was playing in the middle of a back three when he was at Lens. So I can understand looking at him and thinking, oh, there's more to come from this guy as he gets more reps playing as the right-sided centre-back in a back four. He could really blossom. I mean, I don't think he's ever going to be like an incredible passer or whatever, but he looks good now. He's a good age. I think the price was not going to be insane. He's just like a decent defensive centre back. Yeah, like there's not a huge amount to get excited about, but like I don't think he's going to be a total bust, and he could be really good. That's
and as long as you're not breaking the bank to get him, as you said, I think all those apply.
Cool. Well, we'll see if they get that one over the line. Obviously, Aston Villa.
Have they gotten Daniel Malen over the line?
Yes, that's done. That's announced. Okay. They finally made that happen, and it looks like Philogene is going out to Ipswich. That should be confirmed soon as well. So they're having a busy January. But Aston Villa are like, it's like they're playing FIFA, where they like kind of trudge through the actual games until they can get to the bit they enjoy, which is the transfer window. Like that's kind of what it feels like.
But and probably the Champions League too.
Yeah,
think
yeah, probably
that's
Champions League too.
yeah. So they've probably been like spending all kinds of hours to just get the. I guess there's still 2 more games left next week and the week
Yeah.
after. After that, I think is when they'll know who their opponent is in the next, whether it's knockout or round of 16, and then they go to town with that. So really want Emery to take Villa as far as possible. That would be fun.
I think that would be really, really fun. I mean, I think it will suit their kind of football. You know, we've obviously criticized them at times for maybe being a little bit too conservative in the league, which is an Emery instinct, and that's something that serves them really well in Europe, I think. I think you would hope if you were Bade that they were going to be a little bit more conservative, because for the last couple of windows they've been talking about upgrading their right back. You're coming in on that side of the defense where it still does feel a little bit unsettled. You're not sure how much protection you're going to get. So I would be hoping, right, okay, let's tighten things up and play a kind of play in a deeper block where I don't have so much area to cover, even though he is, you know, a pretty good athlete. Okay, I think that brings us to the end for this week's episode. Thank you very much, everybody who's listened or watched. Make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Leave us a 5-star review as well. But really, today, like, the main thing we want to do, Ravi, is say thank you so much for all your insight that you provided over the last few months, for being such an important part of growing this podcast. Like, it's been great for me as well as the listeners to learn so much from an actual expert rather than someone who just, you know, thinks they're an expert online. That makes it sound like I'm talking about Ted, which is funny, but
No, I appreciate the kind words. I think all of us here are, you know, we just kind of share what we know, and, you know, the best way we can, and try to have some fun. I think I enjoyed this a lot, and just talking to you, and I think you know a lot about the Premier League. I think you're a big expert there. So I learned a lot. And obviously Ted as well. So yeah, it's been great, and yeah, hopefully we'll, you know, I'll have a chance to do a few more at some point in the future.
well, and I think this is perfect for if you're watching this and you haven't seen it and you're interested in a career in, you know, the kind of back room of football, then I think your podcast with Ted, where you talked about getting a job in football, is such a useful kind of text to be out there. And
Yep.
also, you know, Ravi leaves one job in football, Ravi gets another job in football. It's the perfect sort of endorsement. You're endorsing your own skills, in LinkedIn terms, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, yeah, that's actually, we put a lot of thought into that podcast, just to answer a lot of questions that Ted and I tend to get on LinkedIn, on social media, DMs and stuff. Hey, how do I get into this? How do I do that? How do I get into football? Or what do I need to do? And I think that we've laid out a lot of scenarios, and also all the great things you get with the job, as well as some of the pitfalls and negatives that the job carries, working inside sports. So yeah, it'll be a great podcast if anyone is interested in what it looks like or what it feels like inside.
Completely agree. And we wish you luck at your next team, which people will be able to find out, you know, before too long.
Yeah,
I
it's
imagine.
gonna be out there soon. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, and thank you very much to everybody watching or listening. We will catch you next week with more analysis. Bye.
Bye.